Go ahead. Can't read that.
All right. Chairman McCoo calling to order the Willington School Building Committee, Willington School Building Committee meeting of April 19th, 2023 at 6:34 p.m. All right, present to speak. Let's start in the room. Is there anyone present to speak?
John Blessington, 29 Mason Road. Sherry Macinda wrote a letter to the school building committee, and she can't be here tonight, but she would like to have it read into the minutes, so I intend to read it into the minutes. Dear SBC members, I listened with interest to the April 5th, 2023 SBC meeting. I disagree so strongly with some of the points that were raised. I hope that you can discuss the following objections. 1, please, no scheduling of a new survey, whether by mail or online. This is a waste of time and taxpayer funds. At any time in the past, what is the precedent for asking people why they voted the way they did? Why would you feel that a process that is private, that is voting, and protected by law would have to be questioned later on, and that you would gain a response that is more meaningful than the 70% of the undeniable turnout of voters who voted no? Let me ask another question. If the results of the referendum had been reversed, would you still be seeking to do a survey? Of course not. 2, please say no to continuation of the existing school building committee. On February 1st, several members of the SBC read their heartfelt prepared statements to support a new school. These several members should be disqualified from serving on the SBC because they are obviously biased at this point. In fact, the pro-new school bias was visibly evident throughout the process in the wording of the charge, the wording of new school, and many minutes of meetings from 2020 on, bias with the present chairman of the Board of Finance, bias with the first selectman, and of course, bias towards a new building with the superintendent since 2020 at least. There was absolutely no attempt at neutrality, especially from the SBC members who sit on the Board of Education, a real conflict of interest. On April 5th, a speaker mentioned our representative form of government. Who are you representing? Obviously not the 70%. You cannot claim that the sign waving, tent sitting, and camping out at the transfer station was purely informational. Even the numerous roadshow informational sessions began with photos of everything wrong with the schools and only one advantage to renovation. 3, the task or change for the new committee need to be entirely different according to the needs of the school. There is a strong need for people to discuss with contractors, understand details of a bid, and stop continuing discussion for another 2 weeks and then another. The teachers, retired teachers, and Board of Ed members will only delay this process. What information could be gleaned from a survey that would assist with this process? Do we need a town vote on downspouts, paints, and concrete pads? How disappointing that the information about various grants is coming from the public, from social media, and not from the SBC, nor from the Board of Education or the superintendent. Please remember that the $200,000 or so allocated to the SBC could have been spent on repairs. 4, please stop wasting time. Summer is almost here and it would be an ideal time to have contractors in the buildings. The Board of Education provided a measly $5,000 for each school to make immediate repairs, yet $105,000 was returned from the school budget last year alone. If the town budget passes with $1 million earmarked for the schools, please use it for that purpose. 5, there is a phrase, lie by omission, and it would be useful for everyone on SBC to see how late in the process more complete information was provided. There were several opportunities over the past several months to include data provided by others, and in fact, the earlier mailings provided scant details in comparison to the online calculations offered later on. Recall that when the lack of cumulative tax liability was questioned, the rough media assessment of properties was decreased From a statistical perspective, discounting the top taxpayers while leaving the lowest ones skews artificially low. 6, please stop claiming that the taxpayers and voters were misinformed. We weren't. We were underinformed until the full impact of the notes and bond and interest was provided. And I'm going to skip the rest of this. I would like to interject my own thing. At some point during the process, I attended a meeting of the SBC and I read a letter to be put into the minutes. The next day I emailed a Word copy of that letter to the board's secretary so that they could be put into the minutes, and they never made it into the minutes. I hope this one will make it into the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to online next. Nick?
Hey, Nick Teller, 49 Myrtle. I want to start off with a question that I hope is going to be answered tonight. Will the SBC honor the votes of the people? It's a yes or no answer, and we don't need a politician type of answer of babbling on about something. It's a yes or no. The survey itself has the vibe that the answers that are provided in the survey will help potentially push a second referendum. Lastly, the SBC should be dissolved and a new building committee should be stood up. Again, I personally believe we need a building committee to do the repairs, because I know this rumor saying people want nothing done. Everybody I've talked to in town, they want the schools done. They want it done responsibly. They don't want a $20 million bond shoved down our throats. Do it. If it's $1 million here, $2 million here, do it in that type of procedure. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone in the room? Anybody else in the room?
Pete Tanaka, 125 Mason. I agree with the first two speakers that this committee should probably be dissolved due to its charge mostly, and that a new building facilities committee be stood up. I don't know what it's going to take to dissolve this committee. It was set up by town meeting. I don't know if this committee can dissolve itself or whether the first selectman can dissolve it. I'm not sure what the process on that is because it was voted in by town committee. I do believe, however, we need a school facilities committee, and that school facilities committee, rather than reporting to the Board of Selectmen, should probably be reporting to the Board of Education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Back online, Lisa Eaton.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess first off, I just want to say thank you for all of the work you've done and continue to do. I believe that not only should the SBC remain, but for two primary reasons, we should work towards a second referendum. Reason one is that no matter what direction we go, we will spend millions in addressing our school buildings, and a new building is a better long-term financial investment than being in a state of continual repairs with two very old buildings. And two, I concur with a comment, I think it was a really important comment made by Peter Latinsik in the weeks leading up to the referendum, and that many people start paying attention towards the end of town processes, or in this case, near the date of the referendum. The problem, though, with paying attention towards the end of this particular process is that means that you would have entered when multiple problems erupted. So we had people in town reach out to investigative reporters with the CT mirror to create a scandal around the property. We had a last-minute financial calculator that created chaos where, under all circumstances, our mill rate was going to implode. And then we had a lot of questions and conspiracies generated around the Hall property and what would happen to it. But I think what's really important to note is that all of these items are addressable. They're not easy problems to solve, but they're solvable. I mean, even though there's nothing scandalous about the property can be moved. Regarding the calculator, we should have a more encompassing financial plan that addresses, for instance, the firehouses. And regarding Hall School, it would be helpful to understand how we would decommission it. So again, I'm not saying these are easy problems to solve, but I'm saying that they are solvable, should be solved, and we should work towards a second referendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Back in the room. All right, back online. I think Matt, you were next.
Yeah, thank you. So the school building committee or the school building
Just give your
referendum.
name, please, so it's on the recording.
Sure, it's Matthew Clark, 42 Burt Latham Road,
Thank you.
Willington, Connecticut. So the school building referendum defeat is now about a month old. So the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, and the SBC have all had adequate time to discuss and debate a path forward. As far as I can tell so far, the path forward, the majority on these boards has chosen is to hire a facilities expert to total up the costs of updating our schools. That's fine, I guess. I don't understand what role the SBC committee has in that process of raising, planning, or managing capital spending on our school buildings. And we already have committees to do that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, and the Capital Improvement Group or committee underneath the Board of Selectmen have traditionally done that job for Willington. If one of those, I don't, like I said, I don't quite get it. If one of those groups or all those groups are not up to the task, then I suggest we reform on how things are done in town government rather than adding another layer of bureaucracy to the process in the form of a school building committee. So the mission that the SBC was authorized by or with, it was authorized by town meeting, and I don't think that includes the school building committee becoming a new capital spending or capital spending advisory entity for Willington. My view is that SBC should be dissolved, or if SBC continues and moves forward, it should have a new mission. Separately, your agenda, separate from that comment, your agenda tonight or today includes something about public communications at meetings. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but any SBC member can make a motion to add items to the agenda that are mentioned during present to speak. That means that issues raised by the public can already be addressed and debated during SBC meetings. So if someone mentions something, it's deemed important, you put it on the agenda, there's a discussion, and then you move to the next item. I don't think that it would be advantageous or helpful for an alternative, which is sort of like a continuous public hearing. In my view, that wouldn't work out well at all. Lastly, regarding a second referendum, I don't think a second referendum is needed. I think that the town leaders need to get together and decide how to move forward, given the will of the people as expressed in the referendum vote. I think people were fully informed. They had a good idea. I don't think they were, coming in late. I think that they got lots of information, and the turnout showed that they were highly engaged. Thank you.
Thank you. Back in the room. All right, Alan.
Hi, Alan Ayers, 38 Timber Lane. I just want to say that SBC has to continue because we don't even know what our other options are. The only cost that we know for repairing the schools right now is an outdated $19 million Friars report that says all of the work is going to be done at one time. That's what the Friars report says. So why people keep saying that we can do $10 million over 10 years, that's just nonsense. That people are just saying things. Until we actually have somebody come in and give us an alternative option, there's no reason to take away the SBC, because we might have to go to a second referendum because the cost to repairs might not make sense. Everyone wanted to do a restoration of Hall School and combine the two there, but the cost wasn't effective. That's why they went with the new school. People claiming that the townspeople knew what was going on and that when they voted, that's just complete nonsense as well. We look at the number of surveys, you look at the number of people that showed up, you look at the number of people that go to the YouTube videos. This is all recordable stuff. The numbers are very, very low. The turnout was very high. I mean, I'm pretty positive that people voted no on a $63 million school, and most of those people did not understand that the referendum was 63 million because that's what you have to put in to submit the grant. I don't think many people really understand that you're submitting a grant and that you're going to try to get the number down to closer to 28 million. People said no to a $63 million school, and it was said multiple times that if we didn't get the grant or the waiver, we were not building a $63 million school. So I think the SBC should stay and keep working, but they do have to find out the cost of the repairs. You have to bring somebody in, and you can't just do repairs, 1 year at a time over these years. It's just a ridiculous idea. This is a huge project that has to be planned out, and if you're going to space out over time, it really needs serious planning. And I think the cost is going to be way more than people think. And so to disband the SBC and then have to do this all back is ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anybody else online? Nick, is your hand up again?
Yeah, I just had 2 points I just wanted to touch on quick. One, I just wanted to update the committee. My February 16th submission for the FOIA request still has not been fulfilled to this date. And then just clarification for the record, CT Mira, from when talking to them, nobody in town reached out to them at all. They came to me, but they came to the town first before somebody reaching out to them. So just wanted to clarify that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else present to speak? Okay. Moving on to chairperson's report. I know that there's a lot of desire in the community from the people speaking up to end the SBC. There is also desire to continue it. I guess I would ask people on both sides of that discussion to hang in while we have a little more time to figure out where we are and to get input from the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen. We'll be talking about this more further on in this agenda. While I do respect and understand comments on both sides of the referendum issue, I don't see, certainly in the short term anyway, and I spoke about this briefly last night at the town meeting, I don't see any likely path to a referendum for a new school at this time. I think the message from the townspeople was very clear on one thing: that project was not to the liking of the townspeople. I think that's clear, and I think most people agree on that. Where we go from there is not as clear. I think we need to at least have a little more discussion tonight, even if this is the last night we talk about it, about trying to get some input from the public, because the yes or no, a simple yes or no is a very clear message, but it also does not answer or reflect on the complexity of what was brought to the townspeople and what was done over the last 2 years to get to that point. So I hope we have some good conversation further on in this meeting about what that means and what we can try to do to understand what the taxpayers may want aside from saying no to that project. I'll talk a little bit more about it in communications. I just want to assure people, just as it was before the referendum, and I couldn't speak too much during the blackout period, but a lot of drama was made about the Hall Foundation essentially being mistreated during this process. It's not true. I've continued to stay in communication with the Hall Foundation, and like I said, we'll talk about it further in communications. As far as the idea of seeking the survey, I do understand why some people don't like it. I would hope if a survey is done, those people simply would not respond if they did not want to respond. My intention and my reason for wanting to discuss the survey is to try to determine what the townspeople want. I think the townspeople want something that's a little more nuanced than no new school. I don't think for everybody in town it's quite that simple. There's been a lot of talk about bias. We heard it in comments tonight, and I've noted it from previous meetings. That conversation seems to center around the idea that the members of this committee should be completely neutral. I don't agree with that. The members of this committee were supposed to look at information and advocate for what they thought made sense. And particularly, I didn't ask Phil's permission, but I'm gonna point out Phil, our superintendent, for this. I've heard repeatedly over the last at least year that disparaging comments that the superintendent is advocating for a new school. Well, what in the world would we expect him to do? I mean, that's a question to the entire townspeople. What would we expect the superintendent to do? If we were interviewing for a new superintendent right now, and we were writing up, no matter who it is in town is writing up questions for a new superintendent, I would guarantee there would be a question that says, will you advocate for the best learning environment for your students? And we would expect that superintendent candidate to say yes. That is absolutely part of the superintendent's job. So to pick on the superintendent because he was advocating for a good learning environment for the students, for what he thought was right for the students, is absolutely preposterous to me. That is exactly what we pay the superintendent to do. So that bias is supposed to be there. And then in lower levels, there should be advocation and bias amongst the committee members for the particular options they believe are right for the town. There's no way to have a group of people here to be just completely neutral and say, I don't care what we do, which one's cheaper or which one's more expensive. I agree that the bias has to have limits, but this idea that the committee is biased and we need to find a committee of people with a different bias or no bias does not make sense to me. I don't know how you do that. It certainly is not a disqualifier for people to be on the committees. Also, the conversation about grants, I think, is very important. We've heard a lot of discussion about that, and why is it that the public's bringing grants? The Board of Ed, the superintendent, the Board of Selectmen is always looking for grant opportunities. Maybe some got missed because of where the school building committee process was going, and it would have seemed that we were ineligible, or it would not have been prudent to apply for certain grants with the assumption that the referendum was going to pass. But I don't know of any time ever where we have not been pursuing grants, and we have not heard repeatedly year after year in Board of Finance meetings about what grant the school got, what grant the superintendent got, what grant the Board of Ed got. It's happening all the time. So I want to assure people that those people are not ignoring grant opportunities. That's it for chairperson report. Approval of meeting minutes. We have a problem with getting our meeting minutes done, and I apologize to the public for that. We do not have a recording secretary right now, and we have not been able to get one. We have been trying to use some hours from the previous admin to the selectman, Kelsey, when she is available, but we don't have them yet. And if we can't get them in the next few days, I will go through the recordings and I'll do the minutes myself. Anything on minutes?
With respect to, I'd like to make a motion to approve the finance subcommittee minutes of March 31. We have those.
Oh, those were published.
Those were published.
Yes. Okay. Second, they were, I believe the town clerk did publish those.
Did they come to us?
They're not on the website.
Sent them to Chairman McCoy.
Yeah,
I have a hard copy if that's helpful. If you want to hold it.
you don't think that they came to the group?
I don't think well, I'm gonna look at the board and say, does anybody else get minutes? I sent them.
It was a couple weeks ago.
I sent them to you because I have
Yes.
trouble with some of the emails of
Sure.
different people, and I figured.
I thought I had sent them out.
I don't know that they went out.
I have
so
a hard
that's-
copy that I'm welcome to share.
But there's no
That's up
proof
to
that it
everybody else.
was.
I'm not a voting member, but that's up to everybody else.
Have you looked on, I thought it was.
I didn't look online, because I had the whole, I had gotten a
Well, I had
copy.
hard copies at the
All right.
last meeting.
So let's hold off on it and be sure that it was recorded properly.
Let's,
Okay,
thank you.
I will, I'll check on all of them.
They are not posted to the town's website currently, guys.
Thank you, Jim. Okay,
I can help with those too, Mike.
okay. Thank you. Okay, communications, as I noted before in the chairperson report, I have kept in communication with the Hall Foundation. And I did ask them, what they had done previous to the referendum is they had made a small committee of foundation members with the idea that if the referendum passed, that committee would be the group that worked with the town on what was going to happen with Hall School. And that their little committee still exists. And what was expressed to me was they would like some time to meet and see if they feel there's anything else left that they want to address right now, even though the referendum failed, and what other things they might want to work with. Maybe not even the SBC, maybe you want to work with the town in another way, the first selectman's office or the superintendent's office in respect to Hall School in any one of a number of possibilities. So I have left that door open for them. Alice emailed me today and said she didn't have an opportunity to get everyone together and have something back for this meeting, but she will get back to me soon. And I'll get that information shared if there is anything that relates to the SBC. And if it needs to go off to somebody else, I'll forward it to whoever it needs to go to. So I just want to assure everyone the Hall Foundation has been communicated with and they are still in the loop. Any questions on that?
I just want to comment on that, Mike. I
Sure.
think what you said is very valuable. Whatever information we've obtained from the Hall Foundation, like we did reviews of the quitclaim deed and the relationship between the town and the foundation. And then there was questions raised by a lot of people in the public that had the referendum positive, what condition the building would be returned. And some of those things seem silent to me in the deed. So perhaps even though we will no longer be a committee, quite possibly, whatever information we have, we should collect somehow and pass on to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education.
Yes.
So that opportunity is not wasted.
I agree. Anything else from the committee on the communication?
We received Sherry Macindas through Ralph.
Yes, and it also did come into the SBC
Email.
email, so we have it there also.
I'd like to add that to the agenda if we can. I see we have a referendum voter feedback survey, so I think that'd be a good location in the agenda to discuss that. What's shared with us in that letter, it seems very helpful to me, and many of the things that went wrong perspective of the referendum failing.
Okay, you want to talk about it in the,
It seems
In
appro-
that,
seems
or do you wanna
appropriate
add
to
an
me, if
agenda?
you have no objection.
7A, it would fit in 7A, Mike.
well, it could fit in communication. Yeah, let's discuss it. Sure.
And then I have a question in general about communications. We still have the communications subcommittee.
Correct.
And the way that works, if we get feedback from the public or communication from the public, it goes to that subcommittee. And then our FAQ is updated as the response. And I'm just gonna say, I don't think that worked very well throughout our process as a committee. I think people were frustrated by not getting a direct response to their questions. And again, I don't mind discussing this later, but it's communications now. And I'm thinking that for whatever period of time, remaining time we have as a committee, maybe that's one change we can make. for the bed.
Well, I did, as you'll see, and I'll get you another group of emails. There hasn't been a lot of email activity over the last few weeks.
Not surprised.
There, you'll see when you get the next batch of emails that I have not responded to every email. Sometimes because they're repetitive or they're off point, or sometimes I responded simply, this will be shared with the committee. Sometimes there are things that have been answered already. But I have also, I have taken the time on many of the emails, including when the Macinda sent in that letter to indicate that it was being shared with the committee, because it was like the same day that Ralph had shared it with the committee. So I have made a little more effort since I've been chair, to communicate a little more directly, to respond to some extent, not to everyone and not in detail necessarily, but I think, I'm not sure how much of a point it makes at this point, but it's probably a lesson learned.
I'm just thinking that might be.
The future SBC that will happen again someday soon that you will probably be on, right?
Hopefully this is my last.
All right, anything else in communications? Did you have more?
No, I'm trying to think of what I was gonna say. I can't right now. I'm sorry. Well, I lost my train of thought.
Okay. Okay, so now we're on to subcommittee reports. There is obviously nothing for the land assessment subcommittee. Finance?
Yes,
We didn't read that.
we did not meet, but we have.
Oh, we have an update.
We have an update on our expenditures.
Okay.
So just a hard copy that town financial manager sent us.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Two extra for the audience. So looking at this, we can be a finance subcommittee of the whole committee, Mike. Not a lot has changed since our last look at this. What I'm trying to understand, and I asked the town financial manager this question, and they get a coherent answer. We have a balance left of 52,000, recognizing what we expended in our encumbrances.
Mhm.
And I asked this, what I thought was a simple question. Are there any other invoices out there? And she said that was a difficult question to answer. But I think it's important for this committee. I'm looking at this, I would make the assumption that there isn't, because there have been no new expenses generated since the round.
We're gonna add one to the agenda tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever that is, I don't know what it is, but
Was it a huge one, Phil?
Mike, I know you were heavily involved in all the pre-referendum activity.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you don't see here?
I'd have to read, just because I just got this
And I
in front of me
apologize.
tonight, I'll have to review it, but as I said at the last meeting, some bills were just coming in, like the March bills, and I don't know if all of those have processed through this yet. And there are a couple, there is one that we have to address tonight, because there was a small run over on one, we have to adjust a PO for a very small percentage. So I don't, similar to the response from the finance department in town, we may have one or two invoices left to come in. I'll have to review this to see.
And then the other help I was looking for, and I know you're gonna be knowledgeable on this, on the back page, like the very next to the last, the Halloran and Sage, that 9389 legal services.
Mhm.
Have we actually encumbered all of that? Was that?
Well, you
was that all-
encumber, you always encumber the
No, I
full
understand,
amount.
but have we spent 9,380?
No.
No,
I
not
didn't
even
think-
close,
I
not
didn't
even
think, I
close.
didn't think so, but I'm
No.
trying to understand it, and I would think most of that was planned, if I remember our discussions for, had there been a positive referendum, were anticipating A lot.
there
of
would be more legal
Okay.
work on land purchase and all that other stuff. So we should be very close in the next meeting or so to be able to decide, whether we can start closing out these purchase orders. And that would return encumbrance.
Yeah.
That would free up encumbrance money. And so what you would actually see is the available balance in that case would be going up
Oh,
and the encumbrance would go
go
down.
down.
You're probably closer to 76.
Well, and that's good, because we've always said as a committee that if there was not a positive referendum, that these funds would be returned, these funds were our use. And,
Well, no, you always say that.
okay,
Let's be honest. You always say that. What we said was everything would be done in the public eye. And that we were engaging services in the public interest, and we were setting up purchase orders with an anticipation of certain things. But we did not guarantee the minute the referendum failed, that would be the end of our work, because we don't know that yet. And so we're not immediately returning the money. However, we're doing everything in the public's view. And like I just said, we probably are going to relieve most of that $10,000 Halloran and Sage thing, as an example. And that will increase the available balance. And at this point, we're not talking about much of any business that would start using that money for something else. So I suspect in the long run, we are going to be returning that money to the taxpayers.
which is good. I'm less interested in what I said, but I believe the committee did recognize that any funds that were not utilized were always going
Would
back to
absolutely, yes.
the town, what, fund balance?
General fund.
General, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you are absolutely correct about that. There's a
That's-
subtle but important difference. The funds we don't use will absolutely go back to the taxpayers. Yes.
That was my concern.
Yep, I agree with you.
Aside from that, then I look forward to any additional information about any invoices that are still extant.
Yeah, I don't think there's much left.
And Phil, you're gonna share something new?
Yeah, we'll add
Know
to
about?
the agenda during old business here.
Okay,
Minor.
unless you have something, Ralph.
No.
So fine. Okay, thank you.
Anything from the committee for the finance subcommittee?
Yeah, can you just email that document out, please?
Yeah, if you send it to, did you send it to me? Yeah,
I did not, I only received it late this afternoon.
That's
I
fine.
apologize. but
do you want to just send it to me
I'll
sometime
send it to
tonight?
you and then
And I'll distribute it to the committee.
I'll do it
Okay,
right
thank
now.
you.
Okay, communication subcommittee, anything? No, okay. So on to old business. I'd like to make a motion to add 7D to old business, which would be PO increase for QA&M. Can I get a second?
Second,
All right, this is just simply to add a agenda item to discuss possible increase for the purchase order for QA&M for the modeling and fit study they did for both the Hall School site and the potential new site. And we can discuss it in more detail if, or when we come to that agenda item.
Okay, so we're just voting. on it.
We're just voting on adding the agenda item. Yeah. I'll do the roll call. James Marshall,
Yes.
thank you. Ann Grosjean,
Yes.
Ralph,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
I'm a yes. Brianna,
Yes.
is that everybody?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
2, 3, 4.
All right, 6 yeses, motion passes. Okay, so old business item 7A, referendum voter feedback survey. I'll start by saying I have mixed emotions about this. I do understand the various comments from the public and from, excuse me, committee members on both sides of it. The only thing I can say is that I really feel, not because I'm trying to get a new school through, but I really feel like we want to learn as much as we can from the public. We have always, throughout the entire 2 years, been seeking better ways and trying to improve how we engage with the public. We continue to get feedback from the public that we did or didn't engage in certain ways, and we improved or failed in certain ways. And I'd like to continue the effort to understand what the public wants. For example, does the public want us to pursue a hall school renovation? Or does the public want us to only do $1 million a year on each school? Or does the public want us to keep 2 schools? Or do they really want us to get to 1 school? Those would potentially help the town agencies figure out how to move forward in the public interest, balancing the public interest with the school's needs. So these are reasons I feel like the survey has value. I understand that some people feel it's invasive. But we're constantly trying to find a way to get feedback. And so those are my thoughts. I do, part of my homework was to get a price on doing it. I did find that the direct postcard mailing is about $800. This is a little more complicated because if we wanted to assure people's anonymity, we would have to basically put a postcard in an envelope. And the envelope would take the postcard to the people's houses. You could even just say postal patron and send it, and so it wouldn't even have a name, or you could say their specific name, or you could go from the registered voter list. You could do it any of those ways. But to try to get a price, I had to figure on all the houses in town, because that's how they price mailers. That would be the maximum. So you'd need an envelope to carry the postcard. Inside would be the postcard, which would have the survey potentially on it. And then that would have postage on it also. So it's 2 pieces of postage. And that way the card could be thrown in the mail and there would be absolutely no way of knowing what address it came from or anything to protect people's anonymity. That is much more than $800, obviously, because it's postage in both directions and it is an envelope and a postcard. I asked a printing company to get me a price to try to get it by today. I didn't get it. So I don't know the answer to that, but it's gonna be, the guesstimate was it would be just over double the cost of the $800 postcard. So you'd probably be looking at close to
Well, it might
$2,000.
be higher because you've got higher postage on the first class.
Yeah, so that was exactly why. So it'd probably be close to $2,000 to do the full package. If that was the method that was chosen.
Yeah.
There were some other ideas. I know, Phil, you had looked into some other ideas
Yeah.
about how surveys are done. We'd had some feedback from the public on how surveys would be done.
Yeah, I reached out to UConn's public policy office. I have not heard back. They have a person that's kind of in charge of public relations that it's not really clear if you can hire them or if depending on if you get an advisor versus grad student versus undergrad that's doing some of the research. I'm still waiting for information back from them, so. But if we were gonna do this, it'd probably be valuable considering it's one of their majors.
Mike, quite honestly, I think that survey really belongs under the auspices of a new school facilities committee to guide them and with their new charge, whatever that may be, as to, and I would hope that new charge would be a little more open-ended than ours was. Because that's the kind of input that committee is going to need. Where did this break down? Rather than us trying to do a forensic look at why we didn't get what we hoped to get, or what some folks hoped to get. This new committee, the way I see it, our charge has been fulfilled. There is nothing left on our charge that this committee can do, other than clean up the bills, clean up the finances, return whatever money is left to the town. And now it's up to the town leaders to decide, okay, where do we go from here? What's the new charge going to be? Are we going to look at a renovation? Are we going to look at combining schools? Are we going to look at some sort of transformation of Hall over time into a 21st century facility? I think that's part of the charge of the next iteration of an SBC. For us
So
to do it, it's just,
So I see your point, but it seems like what you're doing is you're saying that we've got the cart attached to the wrong horse maybe. But then what you're saying is, let's get a new cart and shove it out there and then find the horse. Because why would you create a committee with a new charge and then ask the people what they want? Wouldn't we want to, well, wouldn't that help bank a better charge if we knew what the people wanted?
but is it appropriate that it comes from this committee?
Why is it not?
Why wouldn't it be more appropriate that it comes from the Board of Ed or the Board of
Maybe it
Selectmen?
could come from the Board of Ed or the Board of Selectmen.
Why does it have to come from this committee?
But why shouldn't it? What is the big resistance to it coming from us? I mean, this is what we've been working on for 2 years.
I understand that, but
And if that comes back and we get information that's valuable that says that the townspeople really want to see whatever, many of those options that you said, like the townspeople want to see us keep 2 schools and do a certain amount of repairs every year, whatever it is, then that would help create a new charge, reform a committee or whatever.
I mean, our original charge was pretty narrow.
It had a lot of items in it, but a lot of it was
It was very-
predicated on a single school.
Do you remember the battle just to get 2 words added to that charge?
Remember a lot of battles.
If necessary, in 2 places in that charge, took how many Board of Selectmen meetings to
I don't
get that added?
remember. Other committee members, Ann?
Ralph will definitely bring this back to the Board of Ed. If we decide to do this survey, they'll have a lot of input into this survey as well, especially if that's what the committee wants.
Other committee members' thoughts about the survey? I would offer maybe that Ann sort of triggered a thought for me with what she said there. The SBC charge and future direction status, which is item 7C. What I had envisioned in that agenda item was a discussion of this committee sending a letter to the Board of Ed and a letter to the Board of Selectmen and say, please give us direction. And determine if we are still needed. And maybe we could put in there that we discussed at tonight's meeting, doing a survey to get public feedback. And that we would like them to consider if that is better done out of their organizations. Maybe that should all be part of the same conversation.
Well, I think we should direct that to the Board of Selectmen because this is a Board of Selectmen created committee. And
Sort of Board of Selectmen, but created by the townspeople.
yes, but
Yeah.
technically that's correct. And essentially copy that to the Board of Ed. To get their input to the Board of Selectmen to decide where we go with the town, with the town again. I think Peter's either thinking or got his hand raised.
I want to comment, if I may.
Go.
I want to express again my strong disagreement with having a survey questioning the voters on why they voted the way they did. We would not be having such a survey if there was a positive referendum. So there's something fundamentally self-serving and wrong about asking people why they voted the way they did. But you can make counterpoints on that. I'm sure you will, Mike.
I'm ginning them up right now.
The larger concern to me is the notion that we lack feedback. I think we've had abundant feedback. We saw that last night at the town meeting. I can't say how pleased I was that we could have a town meeting again. That's a town meeting. But we did. We went back to our normal format and townspeople came and spoke. And you were there, Ralph was there, I was there, many of us were there. The message was abundantly clear. We couldn't even discuss the budget without all kinds of anxieties expressed about why our committee is still in operation. I think we have a lot of public feedback. We just chose to ignore it as a committee. I disagree that we reached out effectively to the public. I don't believe we did. I think we had a singular purpose. We focused on that. We did have a highly biased committee. That's not a surprise. I agree with you, Mike. If you have a committee that's composed of educators and people in that profession or realm primarily, you're going to have a particular point of view. But we're getting a lot of public feedback. We have been continuously. I think it'd be useful to have a critique of ourselves using the feedback we have, not trying to generate new feedback to see if there's some premise we can establish to have another referendum or bring back the project that we thought was important. That's what I think would be useful. And I think we have that feedback. We have letters, we've had comments, and all of a sudden we're now searching for something that would justify what we thought the outcome should have been. And I respectfully disagree with that.
Fair enough. I respectfully disagree with a lot of your characterizations, though. I think there are a lot of false equivalencies in what you just said. And one of them is that we've received a lot of feedback since the referendum. We have not. We've received a lot of feedback from a certain smaller group of people. Last night, we had a based on the vote for the capital plan, we had a group of 50-some people who voted. And we had roughly an even split on that particular question. And a lot of so we had at the most the opinions of 50-some people there. The referendum was 1,791 people. That's a whole different sample size. We've had people in present to speak talk about sample size. The town meeting information last night and in this meeting is important information. The people who show up here are bringing valid information to us, each of them being one person. We're seeing nowhere near 1,791 people, not even barely a percentage of that. And that's what I think we continue to struggle with. So to say we're getting a lot of feedback since then we're getting a lot of feedback from a very small sample size of people. Even the people speaking positively is a very small group who's speaking to us. So why would we not try to get a broader and to the other false equivalency where you keep saying that if we got a positive referendum, we wouldn't be seeking answers. Well, of course we would not be, because we brought a proposal. If the taxpayers approved that proposal, then we would know we had followed a path the taxpayers approved of. What we found out was we followed a path they didn't approve of. And so we want to learn why, because there may be information from the taxpayers about the path they want us to follow. That's how I see it. I see the basics of the reasoning very differently.
And we could agree to disagree, certainly, but it's not right, Mike, when any opinion that's different than yours is a characterization, as you describe it.
But you made characterization, so I was just
As
quantifying it.
do you. So that could be applied to anyone's opinion. And I would submit to you that what you can't call a characterization are the 2/3 that voted no.
I agree, that's my point.
And to suggest then that every little group, such as the 4 individuals here tonight, somehow don't represent that or do represent that seems specious to me. We had a clear message from the electorate. We've had lots of feedback coming back at us throughout the process and after the referendum, including last night's town meeting. And you're continuing to seek some other avenue or
Because I'm trying to reach more than 50 people.
Peter, what was the feedback that we received in all of our sessions? What was in all of our emails? What was our feedback?
It was very low.
And the data said what? What did the data say? That we had information for it. Mike's point is, The data that we had is why this group made a decision to go new site. Because the data very clearly, and you can look at the only night that there was more, was the same people as the community night at Hall School. But every other piece of the survey data that we got, the comments coming in, were new school, new site. Still, the point is, we need to figure out what the data is for a path forward. It doesn't mean new school, new site, but we don't know why. And sorry for the people that have hands up online to jump in, but we don't know why they voted the way they voted. We don't know if they support a renovation of Hall School. We don't know that. We don't know if they didn't like the price. We don't know if that's our assumption, right? We don't know if they didn't like a consolidated pre-K through 8, if they want to keep their 2 schools. We don't know that information. All we have is the data we've received so far.
I want to go to the online group. Sorry, guys, we kind of left you out of the room for a minute there. James, I think you were next.
Sure, you guys covered a lot of what I wanted to say, honestly, Mike and Phil, but I do want to say, I mean, I just to comment generally about the survey. I'm torn on this as well. Well, I do see it's essentially the equivalent of an exit poll. And I do see that there's, value in that, because you understand thoughts of the voters. And I do believe that we have a very small sample size, as you said, Mike. We get it's a consistent group of people on either side that comment. And I'm not sure what I want to hear from is the other 1,600 people. I'm just not sure that this survey is going to be effective and we're going to get the response that makes it worthwhile, in all honesty. So that's why I'm torn. But just to Phil's point, I had somebody message me separate. We don't know the reason for those other 1,600 people necessarily. I had somebody come and basically say they didn't feel comfortable with a consolidated K-8 school because they didn't think their kids would be safe. They didn't think the grade merging was appropriate. And that's not something we heard in this room tonight. That's not something we heard frequently at town meetings. It was mostly about costs. It was mostly about the land use. So, I do think there's a lot to draw out. I'm just not sure the survey is going to be the effective way to do it. But that's all I can say at this point.
Thank you. Brianna?
Hi. Yeah, so regarding the survey, like I've said before, you got to follow through with a project all the way. And so I understand having something, some kind of closure this way. But I keep just asking myself, what is the goal? What is it? We can't ask people which way you voted, obviously. And are we really asking them why they voted that way? And we are, because we want to know, where do we go from here? What do you want to do now? That's, I think, really the goal of the survey. That's what we need to know going forward. What do you want to do? What didn't you like? But also, so where do we go from here? What do we do now? And to me, that's important information that either we will use or another group will use to move forward, which is what we need to do. Not so much look back, but let's move forward. And I don't think that this committee failed, for the record. Also, I don't think it's fair to say that as an educator on this committee, I picked what I wanted as a person and I ever pushed it. Actually, my bias, my love is for the kids and the students. And so this whole time, that's what was most important to me. And I feel comfortable with that and I stand by that. So I just wanted to have a chance to say that too.
Thank you. I think, Jim, your hand is up. Is that still up or up again?
Oh, I'm just applauding that last comment. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see the difference. The hand is at an angle. It's
Apologize. I just confused you. I'll
okay.
Stop.
Perhaps the,
Well, you started,
perhaps what I'm sensing is maybe that this is not something we can or should decide on right now. And this, and maybe even if there is a survey, it should move further away from how did you vote to just simply, what do you want going forward? What do you want for the town for educational spaces going forward? And not even bringing up the fact, did you vote yes or no? And so maybe that's less invasive and less intrusive.
That question shouldn't be asked at all.
And just say, what do you want, as a citizen, what do you want going forward? And, you know, put a few options that have been the major options we're talking about, and then put open lines for people to comment or something to that effect. But again, it's probably not something, it seems like it's not something we should decide on tonight, and maybe we should be adding it to a communication that we might discuss in item C.
Okay.
Good.
One of the, not that I'm advocating a survey, but one of the things that I would like to know is what was not included in the charge for this committee that should have been. Because it was highly, I still believe, and I know there's a lot of people that believe, that the charge was focused more on a new school than it was on any other option. And we got into these arguments with the Board of Selectmen as to a new school construction has a bad influence. And the excuse by the particular selectman was that that could include a renovated facility under that label, new school.
Well, the label in the charge, I don't think was new school though. It was a consolidated school.
Yes, it was a school. But the inference was there, I think, in that charge. I don't have the charge with me. Peter probably does. Defining a school. Okay, then we get into all the procedural stuff. When you have item D10, identify potential future uses of the two current school buildings.
If necessary, right?
Yes.
So read the whole
Wait
sentence.
a minute, yes, but let me back up to those Board of Selectmen's meetings. It was a battle, and I know that Mr. Blessington can confirm this, to get those two words, if necessary, added.
Ralph, you're saying to put this in the survey, I'm not sure where this is on the agenda item, I'm missing the connection.
I think he was saying to put it in the survey.
You're saying to ask,
No.
find out.
Not that I was advocating for a survey, but one of the things I felt would be nice to know is what was not included in the charge that the voters felt should have been.
Direction, you're looking for direction.
Now, where was the other place it was necessary, if necessary, was added in there? But I sat through those meetings. I remember those meetings. It was tested. Finding and recommending a site, if necessary, was added. But the original version said finding and recommending a site to meet school construction and town needs. What's the implication right there?
Sure, but wasn't that also resolved over 2 years ago?
No.
I mean, we went into it very much still looking at Hall School. We spent extra money to do a fit test. at
Oh,
Hall
no,
School.
and I'm thankful that we did do that. I don't think we did enough with Hall. We did not do a deep enough dive into Hall as to what is possible. You know, and I think there was an ideal person that we dealt with in those concept plans that could have guided us much farther with what could be done with Hall. And unfortunately, we didn't have the time to do that. And if, you know, I brought it up back in the spring, we should have someone like that person involved with this committee to do a deep dive into Hall.
We also saw fairly clear information that the costs probably weren't going to support that, which helped lead us into.
I disagree. I disagree with that in that I would love to see the estimate produced by Scott for the Hall School option.
Well, we've had it, right? Or what do you?
No. I want to see a detailed estimate.
I think we had that also.
We had a per square foot number on the original building and we had a per square foot number on the addition.
And I thought we had per square foot for demolition, we had per square foot for furnishings, didn't we have more detail than that? I'd have to go back and look
I don't
now.
think we had more detail at all.
All right, I'd have to go back and look now.
Ultimately-
I can't remember.
I think we're getting a little far afield of
Yes.
survey.
Fair point.
There are many things we could discuss about the things that didn't go well. But yeah, recreating a charge, for all due respect, Ralph, in a survey seems very difficult to me. And I'm not in favor of a survey, but an even more elaborate survey trying to reconstruct charges and other aspects of how the committee is constructed seems like an enormous challenge. And I would favor that even less.
Brianna?
I wasn't suggesting that we do the survey. I was just saying if.
Understood.
Brianna?
Hey, okay, agenda item is survey. So, what Ralph was just saying about what the charge should have said, maybe that is something to consider. That is definitely okay, I would reword that, but it is a good question for the townspeople. Not what our charge should have said, but what kind of new group do you think would work best for where we need, what do you want to do? Okay, that's your first option. What kind of group or person do you think should participate? And what should their goal or their charge be? That's all stuff going forward. That's things that we need to know to go from here, whether it's us, honestly, as a town, we need to know what we're going to do because we all have identified there are problems happening at both of our school buildings. So we can't just stay here. We have to go forward. So what do people want to do? Do they have any suggestions about what kind of group or how a group would be formed going forth? And also, what would you like to see their charge be? What goals would you like to see those folks achieve? Those are all things to know, I think. So when you said, Mike, that we really should go to Board of Selectmen or Board of Education and ask them, like, what do you want us to do? I think that is something somebody has to do, certainly. So maybe bring that to their attention when you do that communication.
So how does the group feel about us sort of putting a pin in this conversation while we talk about the next couple of agenda items and seeing if we come to some sort of consensus on a path forward? We seem okay with not making a decision yet or trying to make any decision on survey right now.
Mike, I think it'll be helpful to have those estimates in before we make a final decision about the survey. Perhaps we can hear from Phil when he hears from UConn, and then get some final numbers about the postcards and the envelopes and that, and then we can make that final decision.
Okay, thank you. What were you gonna say?
I think to start working on a letter to the creators of this committee. We can't go anywhere here.
Right,
I think you're on C though.
right, that's, yeah. So why don't we move forward? And if we have to come back to this agenda item, we can certainly circle back to it.
Fair enough.
Okay, I don't have new thoughts other than what I shared at the previous meeting about the public communication at meetings. I know I asked committee members to think about it in the 2 weeks since our last meeting. I don't know if anyone has any input on how we can try to make public participation in the meetings more effective.
Well, I had a lot to say at that meeting, I think. I don't know.
Well, I mean, a lot of feedback we're getting is leave it as it is, two present to speaks, just leave it as it is.
Well, I think
But then we
that's-
also have an angst because people present things at present to speak and all we do is say, thank you.
Right.
And sometimes we try to address some of them in other comments here and there, or we talked about, we could add an agenda item, but that doesn't help us like at the end of the meeting, when we do present to speak at the end of the meeting.
Having the two is good because, you know, people come in at the first one with things that are on their mind, regardless of whether or not it's on the agenda. And then the second one leaves a little bit of opportunity for the public to voice thoughts about what was discussed during the meeting. But it's not a two-way conversation. And maybe an occasional, particularly with a committee like this, especially with a committee like this, to have a public forum. Alternating with meetings.
I think that's what we're trying to wrestle with, because we can't, we also need to keep the effectiveness of the meeting and allow the meeting to continue to operate and
Understood.
allow the commission to operate, to operate within the public eye, but do its work. But this, again, this committee in particular is very dependent on and needs public input.
Yes, because they're the ones that are gonna have to pay for it.
Well, we have to pay for everything that every committee does, but this is particularly, so how do we run an efficient meeting, but also get effective public communication? James?
Yeah, just my take on this, just because I'm somebody who deals with a lot of school building committees. Honestly, this is the rare exception where public feedback and public participation is included in a school building committee meeting that I've been a part of. No, and I'm not saying feedback is a bad thing, but there is also, this is also the rare school building committee where meetings regularly run more than 3 hours long and get sidebarred repeatedly time and time again by tangential discussions. For the most part, you know, I see agendas that run 60 minutes, 90 if it's a big day. And I'm not sure where the disconnect is, but you know, there is an immense value in public feedback. Those are generally, you know, in my experience, related to public engagement sessions where there is a back and forth. It's not a public record meeting where you just listen to people talk. So there is, I think, some accommodation needs to be made, but the fact that business needs to be done for pressing agenda items related to whatever the charge of the school building committee or any committee in town needs to be. But there also needs to be perhaps even a separate avenue for direct back and forth and feedback that is perhaps outside of regular business meetings. That's my 2 cents based on my, you know, recent experience.
Thank you.
The public forum, alternating,
Yeah.
meeting, public forum.
Were you just agreeing to that, or did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I thought about it since our last meeting as well. I like the present format. I'm concerned that if we turn either present to speak into a two-way discussion, that essentially becomes a public hearing. There is no end to it then. And that's, the meeting would become impossible to conduct. What I think is possible is, and I understand what you're saying, like, you know, someone comes in, makes a comment, and then it's cut off and have a nice life. It seems like it's not unique to this board or committee. It seems like it's incumbent on committees and boards when someone comes present to speak, raises an issue, that we recognize it ourselves without having a public hearing. We just say, all right, so this is a good concern, let's add it to our agenda and discuss it amongst ourselves. I think that would give the townsperson some kind of satisfaction that is concerned. And that doesn't mean every single concern is going to become an agenda item, but it seems like we never addressed this, particularly this committee. We had a singular purpose that was evident to the community. Obviously, my opinion, because I'm characterizing Mike, but
I'm waiting for a chance.
I'm sure. But I think that would be helpful and a good middle ground. That's what I'm suggesting.
I would suggest this is not solvable tonight.
Oh, I have one more thing to add to that, if I may.
The answer.
When someone sends us a letter, that should become part of our record. And again, I'm criticizing all the boards and committees in town, including this one. The notion that someone takes the time to send us a letter and we can't make that part of our minutes. And I don't want to hear the town attorney objects to it in some way. This was done for decades in Willington. Those letters were attached to our minutes. And suddenly, because boards find it convenient to dispense with opinions they don't like, perhaps, these letters are not finding their way to the public record. The public doesn't have access to them. And to me, that's fundamentally wrong.
Well, there are some fundamental legal things in play here that you can complain all about lawyers, but the law is the law. And there are things like if you make something part of the minutes, that has a different legal implication. than something that is a public record. And so there is a difference between meeting minutes and public record. And so we have to be careful of that. If we were to follow that philosophy that someone communicates with us and it has to go on the minutes, then all the emails we get would have to then go in the minutes. Just because someone says this is a letter I'm bringing to you, doesn't change its legal implication. All of those communications would have to go in the minutes, and the minutes in this case for this committee would be 600 pages long, or 200 pages long. I'm exaggerating, I'm characterizing. If you started attaching all the letters and communications, you would have voluminous minutes, and those are not the minutes of the activity of the committee. The minutes are supposed to reflect the activity of the committee.
Decisions made.
I don't understand why there can't be attachments to the
Because
minutes.
then it's not something that's the action of the committee. It creates a whole legal problem, because then each person in the town says, my communication needs to be on that also. And if you pick one person, then it seems you're favoring them over another person. It's a complicated legal issue. It isn't just a matter of us saying, well, as a courtesy, this person requested it, so we should just do it.
Which is what I apologize for having a two-way here, but please see if anyone else wants to speak.
And
Perhaps we could have a Google Doc, which would be available to the public on the website. That would include any of our correspondence, incoming correspondence.
Are you volunteering for that work, Ann?
There we go.
Yeah,
all right,
good
so
point, but that would be.
here's what I would suggest for the good of the order. For the good of the order, since we are looking at asking other people, other entities in town to advise us on whether we're continuing or what format we're gonna continue, we should probably not make a drastic decision on how we do our public input.
Yeah.
If the town informs us to keep moving forward, then we need to wrestle with this. And other committees in town need to wrestle with it also. But I guess I'd like people to keep thinking about it, because if we do anything going forward, or if any of us are on a future reformed, some sort of a committee that has anything to do with this, we should want to bring forward ideas how to make the public communication more effective. Because if there's anything I think we all agree on here, we could improve our interaction with the public. We have learned that through this process. I think we put great effort into it, but we could continue to improve it. So, for the good of the order, I'd like to move on to item C, which is the SBC charge and future direction status.
I think we already beat that one up.
And I think we've touched on it already. I think that if the committee agrees, has consensus on it, I can send a email to the first selectman and the chairman of the Board of Education and say, here is our status. It's time for you to provide guidance as to whether we continue, whether we reformat, whether it goes back to the townspeople, whatever. Give us some direction on what to do. We anticipate having all our bills in the next few weeks. We would be ready for new direction or
A vacation?
sorry, I had to figure out where the off button was. We are ready for instruction.
We were talking about a joint meeting. Is that what you're talking about, or is that?
We could suggest a joint meeting even, yes. But it's time for someone to give us direction. We shouldn't, I think the feedback is pretty clear. We shouldn't just be seeking our own information on what our direction is. We should be asking other people to give us.
While we're on, may I?
Yes.
While we're on the subject of the charge, so are we all in agreement, or is there a consensus, if I can use that word, that we agree that we fulfilled A through D and 1 through 11 of our charge? I believe we did, but if someone doesn't think we did, I'd like to review them now under this agenda item.
I don't,
Because there has been discussion that, well, maybe the committee should continue because there's aspects of the charge that weren't completed or interpreted differently. And I don't want that kind of ambiguity. If there's something here that we didn't do, I want to know as a committee before we reach out, as you describe it, to the selectmen. or really the town who created us?
Well, I reviewed it item by item, and my feeling is there's three categories of, some things are complete. Based on the referendum no vote, some things are complete. We can't go any further on identifying a consolidated school option at this point.
Or used for vacant buildings?
We can't go any further on a use
Why is
for
that?
vacant building because we haven't made them vacant.
Why is that? Why can't you talk about defining a pre-K through grade 3 school?
Well, the funny thing is I said it out loud, then I started to question myself. Because if the feedback is look at Hall School as an option, then that would still be a consolidated. Maybe this is why we need.
But I would submit respectfully, Phil, that's a Board of Ed task.
Which is why we're gonna communicate with them, right?
But, and I just want to understand.
It's our charge.
I don't know if anyone else feels this way, so please chime in, but I feel we fulfilled our entire charge. And based on the referendum outcome, I don't see an activity here that we need to pursue, but if anyone else feels differently, I'd like to hear that while we're on this agenda item.
So back to what I was
hanging.
So back to what I was saying about the three items, there are things that we have not done, there are things that we can't do. And there are some things that seem sort of resolved, but then once I said it out loud, I didn't feel the same way about it. So I guess this is a good reason to ask for some guidance. Because it is true, we talked about it multiple times tonight. If the taxpayers say, we want to look at Hall School, then that would potentially still be a consolidated pre-K through 8 school.
And if the townspeople say, we need to carefully examine an affordable option that fits within the capacity of the town to pay for a school, a fire department, public works, and town offices, town employees as a whole, then that kind of complicates the issue.
Well, it could completely reformulate the charge too.
Yes, it would, but
Or eliminate the committee.
quite frankly, I think that was a big part of why the referendum went the way it went. We weren't looking at the total picture of the financial impact on the taxpayers.
Right.
Which.
Well, we said that was outside our charge.
Right.
That was our
Yes.
convenient escape route, yes. And it should,
Well, it was true though.
I'm not saying it wasn't true.
So, may I, please, unless there's any,
No one has their hands up, so go ahead.
I think I understand what you might be saying, Mike, but I want you to be clear. So D says the committee shall be responsible for, I think this is what Phil was just referring to, defining a pre-K grade 8 school to meet Willington's educational needs in cooperation with the Board of Education. I believe we spent a considerable amount of time after we received the ed specs from the Board of Ed doing that. So what did we fulfill in the charge with respect to that very important item in the charge?
Well, I think there's a subject of interpretation there, and then once Phil said it out loud, and I heard myself say it out loud, there is the possibility that people would say, well, you defined one, the townspeople said no. So you still have to define one that maybe is more acceptable to the townspeople.
And to me, what kills that is what Ralph just said. I think and this is where, I think is really important. If the community, because right now, again, we don't know the why. If the community said it is too darn expensive with all of the other things, with the roads, the firehouse, everything you just listed, that rules out a consolidated school. For me, that's just my belief. Looking at all the costs and everything we've seen, I don't think this town can afford a consolidated school because of the amount of work it would take to make either one, or either new or Hall, a consolidated school. That to me is the end of one. And so if you need that information to know that. If we can gather that information, they just said, look, it was just way too expensive. It's not that, you know, it's not that we would love to do new, or we would love to do hall. We just can't afford it. That's the end of that. To me, we can't do any more. But the 1,700 voters, we don't know the why. We don't know if it was a supportive all school. And this is where, for me, if you know that, if they said cost, and this is where there's legislation right now and that I'm struggling with, that's active, talking about school building committees and school building projects and the percentages. And the state is, you know, you've got to kind of back up what you're saying. If you really truly want to support consolidation or regionalization, you better put your money where your mouth is. Because if you don't, you got to stop saying it because you don't believe it. So the legislation right now just continues that 10% for an increase for someone who is going a reno project, full reno, right? But for us, it doesn't make sense when we're consolidating. There should be, in my opinion, a reward for a consolidation or a regionalization. The reason the reward should come from the state is because they're paying less in the future. So Mansfield's a great example of this. They went from 3 buildings to 1. They're no longer paying for reimbursement on 3 roofs and 3 ventilation systems and 3 sets of windows. Any project that they apply for, they're getting their full reimbursement rate for it when they do a project that qualifies. So now they're going to 1. And so to me, that also would be a reason, like, hey, and I'm looking at the charge, Peter, and I'm looking at, the funding piece of it. Like, do we need to see if that's even a possibility? If there's a special request that we can be eligible for that bonus, would that change the voters' mind? If they knew, hey, we're not going to get 45% or whatever we were going to get, we're actually going to get 72%. Would that change your mind on the vote? We don't know that. Does that make the whole school object more palatable if we were to do that? Would it make the new school project more palatable to do that as a consolidation? Those are questions that I think still, if the answer is a flat out legislation, our legislators say, take a hike, we're not going to get that through. That's dead.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's where I'm checking. There are still some things. There's not a lot of things left, Peter, in my opinion, on here. And this is, I think, Mike, your point, what you said last night.
Talking about D3, Phil?
Um,
Developing a proposal with associated financial commitments, is that what you mean? Or no, securing state funding for,
It's
okay.
securing state funding. It's really around that. And so there's a couple things that they're like the final steps of this committee that if they fail, then in my opinion, this committee dies. And then we need to figure out, I mean, all the town can do is then repair at that point, but that's not a long-term plan. But that doesn't impact this group. And the other thing I'm going to say, and Ralph asked me this on the way out last night, was a school building committee has always been in town, whether you know it or not. The school building committee has been the Board of Education.
Yes.
When we did the roof project, the school building committee was the Board of Education. And so they're always there. It's just that this group was pinned with this specific charge.
Can I ask a question, or may I ask a
It's up to
question?
him.
Hang on, James has his hand up. James, go ahead.
I'll lower my hand first. Yeah, a lot was said since I raised it, so I'm trying to remember. I originally dropped down here, I think, just as I would support kind of a joint meeting between the school building here and the Board of Ed, to discuss what the potential next steps could be. But additionally, there's so much open-ended with this, and I think Phil touched on it, whether it's a consolidated school of Hall or, improvements to both schools. None of those are even known yet. And quite frankly, the costs aren't anywhere near defined for renovating on both schools. And that's a big project with the Board of Ed. And others likely need to entertain. But I think there's a lot of input on this board that can help inform that process and what may be the most effective path forward for alternative options. So I'll stop there because I think I'm detouring from my original point, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Peter. I just want to ask Phil, on my time on the Board of Ed, one of your predecessors, Mike McKee, was superintendent. I was on that board for 9 years, and we had a Board of Education facilities subcommittee. Does that exist now, Phil, or is it just a committee as a whole?
It's a committee as a whole. So if there's a big project, I'll give you an example. So there's a board meeting that's either being scheduled or been scheduled. So we have a fire panel replacement. We pull in the quotes. You know, I consulted with the fire marshal, I consulted with Mike, who has expertise in this. And so you get the information from the expertise. I'm bringing a subcommittee, the finance subcommittee for the Board of Ed is the one that will review those.
There is a
quotes.
finance subcommittee.
There
We
is.
had that too.
They'll review that and then they'll bring that to the full board, and make a recommendation. When it's something bigger that, you know, you need drawings for, and we've used Carl before, town engineer, that's where you need an outside expert and they'll have to hire sometimes for that. The roof project and some of the things that where there's grants for the state, their process is pretty convoluted and they know that. And that's another piece of legislation that's being considered, just the amount of craziness that superintendents are the only people that can complete that application. Which to me, I'm not an architect and I'm surely not an engineer. I went to school for many, many years for education, for leadership, for my superintendent's position. I don't remember having any of those courses, but we were expected to commit those things. And so when it comes to those big grant applications, this is the reason you know, the discussion about a facilities director, or when we had the roof project, we hired Scott Pellman because he's got expertise in those areas to get those projects through and you're not spinning your wheels. So yes, it is the committee as a whole makes those recommendations. The long-term plan though, and this is where to me, the survey, Jim Marshall's mentioned this about visioning. I'm okay. I would have been okay renovating Hall School. I'm looking for a project and a solution. Like we need to know where in the world we're going. Because right now, if it's just repair, it's just repair. But let's agree it's going to be just repair and not panic when it's $2.7 million for 2 roofs and ventilation for 1 building. Because that's what it's going to be. Right. So we need to have a plan and the town needs to be part of that. And that's part of the survey feedback. Like, where are we going? Do you want us just to stop the conversation about a consolidated school? We need to know that. Is it just too much money? And every small town in the state is going to have the same conversation as their buildings age and they're only getting 50% reimbursement and they're going for a $60 million building. No one can afford that in a small district. So
Back to, was it D3 you were referring to with funding? And your example was Mansfield? So they went from 3 schools to 1?
yeah, I'm just saying that they're saving money long-term. That's why the state.
Yes and no. Yes and no. And you have to look at something like that from the taxpayer's perspective, Phil. Yes, you may get better grant from the state of Connecticut, but state of Connecticut doesn't give you any money to deal with those empty buildings. That is on the local taxpayer. And if you're going to do a project that's going to take all these kids because you've got to reduce enrollment and put them all into one facility, that's great. But the taxpayers have to foot the bill for the rest of it.
I think that's exactly his point, is the state is trying to promote consolidation, but they should back it with some better money.
But they're not helping us.
Right, that's what he's saying.
That's what
They're
I'm
not
saying.
helping us.
That's the point I'm trying, and this is why projects get rejected, I think, because the taxpayers recognize, hey, all right, you're telling us what the school costs and what our debt service is going to be. Okay, well, maybe that fits into our town budget, but it doesn't tell us squat about shutting down those buildings and what that's going to cost us. And if the taxpayers don't know what that bill's gonna be, they're gonna be leery.
That might have been a reason for a no, right? And that's,
I
again,
suspect that it is a substantial.
would it be a yes for consolidated school if you knew the two costs or the one cost if it's all school? That's again, more information that we heard from, I'm gonna say 300 people. No offense to the people in the room, but I know their faces. I know they've been here for a lot of meetings, right? We know the same people have come through, but beyond your 50 people, the same 50 people who almost sit in the same exact seats last night.
We need a badge.
Right? You don't need a badge because we know who you are. Like, it's the same 50 people and we need to have a good direction for the town. We need to hear from more for that because we can't create a plan with the Board of Education, and I know they're elected, and the selectmen, I know they're elected. This group was appointed. You're still only 20 people. And 20 people to come up with a plan. We need a plan that people are going to support and follow through on. Because you can
Well-
say, yeah, we want to fix the buildings, but if you don't vote when it comes time to fix the buildings,
Then we have the wrong plan.
what's the point?
Right.
But on the other hand, Phil, your point is valid about seeing the same faces. But every one of those faces is also in contact with anywhere from 4 to a dozen.
Not 1,700 people. I'll give you, they're talking to people, but they're not
No,
talking to
do the
them.
math, just if every person was dealing with 10.
I get your point.
I have to comment here too, second what Ralph was saying. I have asked so many people to come to these meetings, and frequently the response I would get would be, I'm not coming. I don't want to go and face 2 selectmen, a superintendent, Board of Ed officials. They feel intimidated. This is just a reality. Are you promoting a blind survey? This is not, this is not a receptive group.
Phil, I was in a public hearing.
Outside input.
Many years ago, it was for FedEx, RPS. And it was one of my first public hearings at the old town hall. And I was a quiet, shy person, believe it or not. And I felt it necessary to speak my mind at that meeting, and I trembled throughout because I'm standing in front of 100 people in the room speaking, and it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
But I did it anyway. But the majority of the people are going to rely on those that they either elected or that they come in contact with to do the right thing by them. So don't judge attendance simply
I'm
as
not.
the number of people that you're reaching
I'm
out.
looking for direction. I don't know that we have direction right now.
I don't disagree with that.
That's where I'm looking for, you need feedback on direction, because I can say till I'm blue in the face, I want to renovate hall, or I want a new school, or I just want to fix the do the things that are broken and let's move on. But we need direction and you need support to get those things.
Yeah, agree.
Mike, can I say one more thing about I think it's important because this came up over and over and I was pretty quiet. I didn't say a word last night, I don't think. And this talks about moving forward. And I've heard over and over, we need to dissolve this committee so we can apply for grants. I'm going to tell you, there are so few items on our fix-it list that actually meet grant requirements that we're eligible for, and not eligible because we have this committee. We're not eligible because there's not a lot of grants. You're looking at ventilation, you're looking at roof projects. Those are not going to happen this summer. You wouldn't even have time to get through OSCGR to get them in this summer, never mind put them, it's a summer project. So from the standpoint of this committee holding work back, they're not. There are other things that are in the works that are still happening. And the grants that people, just because you see on Facebook, doesn't mean we don't know about grants. If you look at our budget, there were over $500,000 in grants applied to the 23-24 budget. Just because I'm not responding about someone pointing out a grant, oh, this would be great. we should do this. We already know about that. We knew about that before you did, because we get those announcements every day. We know what we're eligible for and we know what we're not. The roof project was killed, and you did a very nice job explaining that last night, because the
I could
director.
have remembered the numbers more.
You did, that's okay. The numbers weren't the point. But if we're not going towards a new consolidated school, that's where we would be eligible. But we have time right now because it's not gonna happen this summer. At some point, though, we do need to move, because if we're going to try, if we are going that direction for the fix it, we need to know in enough time to make sure that is a very comprehensive plan, and you do it right for both buildings, or one building 1 year and one building the next, so that you're getting your ventilation at the same time you're doing your roof, that you're doing the same time you're doing AC, all of those things happening at the same time. So at some point, it's gonna come to, you know, there needs to be a decision so we can get on that and have enough time to apply, get through OSCGR, have the design phase done, which needs to happen still, specifically for ventilation, and then apply and get all the bids out and line everything up for a summer. It takes months to do that. So
I have to react here and ask both of you this question, because I shared the public's frustration last night with that question. We said, legitimately so, during our time as a school building committee, that the roof project was suspended because the state recognized that we were considering a new school. We now know we're not considering a new school. The townspeople sent us a message loud and clear. So why isn't it reasonable for the townspeople to expect that the project that was suspended is now unsuspended and we can proceed? Why is that unreasonable? It seems so logical to the average person, and I'm certainly one of those.
Logical.
I think he already just answered it.
I must be incredibly dense.
Because he did, he just said we can potentially be moving forward with those. It can't happen for the summer because it just can't happen. It's already too late for this cycle. For this summer, but it can still move forward.
I think the sense last night at the town meeting, it was that it's not happening at all, despite the fact that the new school.
No, my answers last meeting about the roof were simply, this is what happened to that project, because some people were asking, or maybe some people have even come to me and said, well, didn't the taxpayers put that $1 million aside to do the roof? No, the taxpayer didn't.
No, that's incorrect. That's a new source of funding.
Right,
But
the taxpayers put aside, they agreed to $1 million project, but they put aside the 400,000 or whatever it was. Again, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but the townspeople, the vote that was voted on had in it that it would be net reimbursement from the state. So it was, the townspeople approved $1 million project expecting the state to pay 650,000.
and now the expectation of the town is that we recover that somehow by reapplying.
That may be what happens going forward.
Correct.
No one said that isn't happening.
Well, it's in our plan. It's in our CIP plan.
Just Peter, just to reiterate what Phil said, it's important that the roof happen in a comprehensive plan. We don't want to put a new roof on this summer and then the next summer begin to tear it apart to install ventilation and all of those things. So we will do it. We really need to have a comprehensive plan before we look at that.
it needs to be funded.
That's the same thing EO Smith did. I attended the meetings for EO Smith where they had money to do a new roof, but they also got a grant to do solar. And so they put a halt on the roof for a short period of time to get the solar grant to catch up. Because otherwise the people installing the solar would have been walking all over the brand new roof and drilling holes through it all over the place. So they held up the roof project, got the solar to catch up, have the two projects work together so that the solar people made all the penetrations first and the new people came in, put the roof on, and then the solar people put the panels over. Because if they had done the solar first, then the roofers would have had to remove all the solar panels. So they had to coordinate brackets first, then roof, then solar panels. emails.
Doing
That's
this in
like the
sequence
town
makes
meeting.
absolute
We had a
sense.
town meeting to vote on.
Say that again.
I don't
Sorry.
disagree with that. All of that said, we're still on this item, Mike, SPC charge
Yes.
and future direction
Yes.
status. I agree with everything that's been said. There are multiple directions we can go in here. The problem I feel that we have, and the main reason the referendum failed, was public distrust. I don't think.
You
that-
think?
That's my belief.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think the townspeople trusted this committee and what was put forward, for various reasons. Because I feel that's true, I think the sooner we can explore all these other possibilities, the better. And I think this committee is an impediment to that. That's certainly my opinion, but I wish to move or make a motion at this time that this committee recommend to the Board of Selectmen that this committee be dissolved so that all of these other avenues can be pursued as soon as possible. Because I agree with all of them. And that's why I'm placing my motion on the floor, Mr. Chair. And I'll ask for a second.
Is there a second to the motion? Not hearing any.
All right, I'll second it for discussion purposes. Let's kick it around. What's the difference?
I think that we've spent a lot of time talking about a more comprehensive answer than asking them to discharge the committee. I think that, we've been talking about things about sending an email, asking for a joint meeting or asking for direction from those committees. That's different from saying, we're asking you to dissolve us. Any other?
Speaking to my motion,
Sure.
I think it's important that all of these avenues that we're talking about, whether it be roofs, renovation, redefinition of a single K8, go forward. And I don't see how that's possible by this committee. And frankly, candidly, I think it's hard for us to do. There was a very strong bias of this committee towards a single solution. The charge was written that way. The members of the committee were selected that way. It was heavily stacked with high public officials who are wonderful people. You're a selectman, Mike, and that's fantastic. It's a very different committee than the one I served on in 1990. The first selectman at that time, Carlton Schicky, made a conscious effort not to involve himself in the committee. He wanted it to be a committee composed of townspeople. And we completed a successful project because it was townspeople that were directly engaged. It was a diverse group of people from the community. It was not, with all due respect, Brianna, just the educational perspective. There has to be buy-in by the townspeople. And they need to be represented, and that didn't happen on this committee.
So to one of your points about exploring the options and moving forward on that, if anything would slow that process, it would be the time to disband and appoint a new committee.
Your single town meeting.
Yeah, but you have to set it all up. And you're talking a couple of months before you'd appoint a new committee. And you might have all the same people in this room volunteer to be on that committee. And then are you gonna say to them, no, you're not allowed to be on the committee? You wanna donate your time to the town to help improve things? You can't be on the committee because you're on the last committee? Is that what we're gonna say to people?
I would hope not.
So we'd waste a month or two disbanding this committee and then putting maybe these same people back on the committee? The
think-
committee is not the impediment to moving forward. We need direction. And we need to pursue whatever that direction is. It's not the committee. A lot of the desire that has been expressed directly to me from people who voted against it. A lot of the desire and the reason the SBC keeps coming up is punitive. People are emotional about the, how expensive it's gonna be, and they feel almost like it was an assault or an insult. And this is not all people. These are people who have talked to me. Some people have talked to me. And so the desire is to punish the SBC. People want to shove a knife in it because it insulted them and it proposed something that was preposterous to them. And I understand, I respect their feelings, but punishing the SBC has nothing to do with moving forward with the town. Getting direction is what moves us forward.
The problem there, Mike, is you're onto something as far as stabbing a knife into the SBC. But if the same group were to continue, does it have the credibility?
James?
Food for thought. I don't know.
Sorry, I have a background child who just wandered into this.
okay.
No, you know what, I just wanted to make note and say, honestly, Peter, I'm just personally frustrated and offended by the repeated repetition of the mindset that the SBC was stacked for a new school. One, it was the charge that was granted by this committee. Two, I personally am offended because I'm not here trying to push a particular project. At this particular time, the charge was advance the most effective new school construction that was on the table. And I joined late. I can't imagine how other members have been here working on this for 2 years feel based on some of these comments that come out of your mouth at any of these meetings. So I'm just remarkably frustrated by that mindset. Quite frankly, I just want to see improvement in the schools because they need a lot of work, probably more than anybody here even realizes. It pisses me off, quite frankly, Peter, and I'm really frustrated by it. So, you know, I'm going to stop talking now.
Brianna?
Yeah, so I think absolutely do not think that this committee should ask to be disbanded. That sounds like quitting to me. And any one of us has the ability to resign at any time if we feel that that's necessary. I do think going to the Board of Selectmen and asking them for direction is the correct path to follow at this time. That's how this committee was made, between them and the Board of Education. So therefore, the responsibility lies with those people.
Any other comments on the motion?
Yes. I think we did receive direction, and I don't think it's punitive, Mike. I reject that.
I'm telling you what people told me, and you spent a lot of time in these meetings saying, this person in the community wants me to tell you this. And I'm telling you, people told me that they want to punish us. I'm telling you exactly quotes from those people, okay?
I'll accept that, but I don't agree with it. I don't think it's productive at all.
I agree with that.
That said, I think it's ultimately important to recognize that we have to respect the vote of the townspeople.
I feel like we've said that 100 times tonight.
But you're suggesting that this committee should continue in spite of that.
No,
And there's something fundamentally.
no,
wrong
I
about
am
that
not.
to me.
I am not.
Mike, may I call the vote?
Thank you.
Okay,
I second that.
need to
We have a
vote.
motion to call the vote. Let's vote on the calling of the vote. We're not voting on the main motion. Peter,
Yes.
Ralph,
All right.
I'm a yes. Brianna,
Yes,
Jim,
Yes.
Ann.
yes,
Okay. The motion to call the vote has passed. Now we'll vote on the motion, which was to, would you like to repeat again? Make sure.
I move that this board to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that the school building committee be dissolved so that all new avenues, school construction, renovation, repair be pursued.
Thank you. I thought I'd written that down before.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone heard the reread of the motion. We'll vote on the motion now. Ann,
No,
James,
Nope.
Brianna,
No way.
I'm a no. Ralph,
No,
Peter.
Yes.
Okay. Motion fails, 5 no's to 1 yes. Okay,
let's move on.
I would like to move that the school building committee sends an email to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education asking for direction through either communication or a joint meeting.
Second.
I'll do it second.
Okay, discussion on the motion.
so we're asking them for direction for a new chart.
Direction either through communication or a joint meeting. We'll leave it up.
Very good, thank you.
Well, either way, a new charge is that still gonna have to go through town meeting?
Well, they'll give us direction. They'll say you're dissolved, or let's have a meeting, or this is the direction you should go. We'll call a town meeting to set the new charge. So we'll get direction from them.
So if we continue, then yes, it'll be most likely a new charge and town meeting.
We're gonna get direction from them as to what to do.
Yeah. Definitely need direction.
Yes. Any more discussion on the motion?
Yes. I wish to oppose this motion. I don't understand why we need to seek direction from the Board of Selectmen. It would seem to me that this is yet another attempt to circumvent the results of the referendum. And I disagree with that strongly. I think it's disrespectful of our townspeople, especially those that vote.
Thank you. Brianna?
We don't have the power to dissolve ourselves. We have to be told that. So that's what we're asking is, what do you want us to do going forward? It doesn't have to do with the referendum vote, except for we are here now and need to know what is being asked of us going forward. That's all.
And also, if we're able to do our survey, we'll have a clear direction, hopefully from our townspeople, as to what they would like to see us do, or see another committee do, whatever the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education decide. So we're changing direction, and that's, this is the way that we need to do that. So I think, Peter, we are kind of honoring your request too by changing direction.
Any more discussion on the motion? All right, I'll call the vote. James?
All right, Trevor. Yes.
Ann?
Yes,
Ralph?
All right.
Peter?
Nay.
I'm a yes. Brianna?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5 yes to 1 no. All right, item 7D. PO increase for QA&M. Just to bring everybody back, we had hired QA&M through a bidding process in,
That was for that form for the state that they had to do?
no.
Oh, okay.
Hang on, I'm getting to it. We hired them through a bidding process back before the first of the year. to do the conceptual plan / fit study that was for the new option as well as the hall school option. Everyone remembers those color block drawings we reviewed, and I believe our purchase order was $19,500. And we got the last bill from them, which was, they had billed us for the 19.5, but they had not yet billed us for the reimbursables. And that was in their contract that we signed, that if they had reimbursables, they would be billed separately.
I remember that.
So we have $197.28. So I'd like to make a motion that we increase the purchase order for QA&M by $197.28 to pay the final invoice for reimbursables.
Second.
And Ralph seconded. Any discussion? All right, stand by. I'll call the vote. Peter,
Yes.
Ralph,
Aye.
yes. Brianna,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Ann.
Yes,
Motion passes. Okay, I'd like to move to add one item to new business about subcommittees. Should I get a second?
Second.
It would be item 8A, by the way. All those in favor of adding agenda item 8A subcommittees?
Aye.
Aye.
yeah.
Looks like we're unanimous. Just briefly, I thought since we are at a minimum, gonna do some changing, reformulating, certainly some reevaluation. And we have some things that we don't really need to be tying up with subcommittees right now. I thought that I would recommend that we disband the land subcommittee, which I chair, since we are not in pursuit of land assessments right now. Should there be some reason we need to come back to it, we can always come back to it. I think we can disband the finance subcommittee since we are down to our last bill or two. And I'll take guidance on the communications subcommittee. So thoughts?
Hold up on the finance.
Ann?
As far as communications go, I'd like to keep that current in case we do the survey. We could maybe communicate through the wire to encourage people to respond. Also in sharing any results that we're able to get from the survey. If we decide not to do the survey, maybe that would be a time to reconsider, but.
Okay, other thoughts, since we're talking about communications, other thoughts on communications?
I think it's a good idea. Sorry, I'm raising my my real hand. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to hold on that and keep it open for a while. The communication subcommittee, just till we see what flushes out over the next, back from correspondence with Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen.
Okay. Anything else on communications? No? All right, well, I'm gonna make, as far as land, I'm gonna make a motion
Before you
to.
do, Mike, are you closing discussion on all these committees?
No, I just asked about communication. No one else said anything
Oh, I'm
else. about
sorry, then you were making
communication.
a motion and I thought we were ending.
No, I'm moving on to land right now.
Oh, good, that's where I want to go.
I'm taking a little liberty with that one since I'm the chair of it.
And I have a question about it, so thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna move that we disband the land subcommittee at this time. Can I get a second?
Second, for
Okay,
discussion purposes.
yes.
Question.
Discuss.
Is there any recoverable funds from those activities that could help us with things in general? Like,
I'm not sure what you mean.
well, we expended monies on surveys, and land testing and environmental studies and so on. So is that all sunk cost at this point? Is there anything recoverable is my question?
I don't think there's anything that's recoverable. I mean, what are we gonna do? Go ask the survey people for their money back? For the
No,
money back that we
I
paid them to do the
don't, I
work?
honestly don't know. That's why I'm asking a question.
No,
Are you referring to any potential grant money to cover the cost of what we've done? No,
part of evaluating the property.
that was all on us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brianna?
I'm just wondering if we have any, I guess, polite or legal loose ends with the property owners that we need to tie up.
I don't, there's some communication going on with the property owner right now, sharing the results of the various different processes that were done on their property, you know, like reports and stuff. I'm waiting for a final copy of the environmental report, things like that. But that's just a matter of, that's a simple communication matter. Wouldn't need the subcommittee for any of that.
Right, okay. Sounds good.
Anything else on the land subcommittee? All right, let's vote on disbanding the land subcommittee. I'm not even sure if this needs a vote or if we can, if the chairman could just say it's done. I don't know.
Vote can't hurt.
Yeah, it makes it more official, right?
Didn't we
Okay.
vote to make it in the first place?
I think we voted to appoint them.
I think so too.
I know we voted the Points Finance Subcommittee,
Right,
because it was
yeah.
strenuously objected to.
So let's just.
All right.
Get it over.
So, I'm gonna take a risk. All those in favor of disbanding the land subcommittee, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
I,
Looks like we're unanimous, okay. Discussion on the finance subcommittee,
I'd wait for the next meeting,
purpose being,
just to clear out all the funding bills.
so we did bills before the finance subcommittee existed, right? And we got into the finance subcommittee because we were expecting some complicated and large tasks, especially about grant funding and stuff like that. I remember you were advocating a lot for the finance subcommittee for some of the more challenging aspects, tax impact, things like that. All that stuff is behind us. And really, it's just now a matter of, and we have this PO change. We might have like one bill left to come in,
Okay.
and that's it.
I mean,
So I don't know.
I think the committee as a whole can handle it.
Yeah, it seems like we can start.
I don't.
The idea is, I'm trying to start reducing our footprint and.
We'll still get the
I think it's-
report.
I think. it's-
Right, we're still gonna get the same report.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wise direction.
Yeah,
Okay,
hands
all
up.
right. I don't know who was up there first. We'll go with Jim. His hand is still up.
It's the only-
I was just gonna say, I don't see any reason at this point to hold it, to keep it open either. It can be handled as a matter of business
Okay.
All right.
regularly.
I move that we disband the finance subcommittee.
Second,
Okay, motion and a second. Are we good enough? We can try a hand vote again. All those in favor, wave and say aye.
I
aye.
All right, that's unanimous also. Future business items, I think at this point, it's probably minutes, cleaning up minutes. And answer, whatever answer we get back from the communication to the BOS, BOE.
Yeah, it's a small list.
It's a small list, right? Anyone else have anything they want to add to a future agenda item? All right, let's move to present to speak. We'll start in the room.
John Blessington, 29 Mason Road. I just wanted to comment on a couple of items that were discussed tonight. Number one, on your public participation. I'm gonna start beating this thing to death, I think. For 20 years, I was involved in town politics. I was on the Board of Selectmen, and the public participated in meetings. People would sit out here, you'd sit there. If you were in the middle of a meeting and I had something, I'd raise my hand, you'd call on me, I'd say what I wanted, you'd argue back and forth. This always seemed to work very well, because things could be brought up, like tonight you were discussing the surveys. And I'd like to say this about a survey. If you, the perception from my point was when you held these surveys, you decided what the answer was going to be, and then you asked your questions. And you had things like, did people want to go with a new school, or did they want to go with renovating Hall School? Well, we're gonna have a meeting up here, and we're gonna discuss which we're gonna go for. What do the people want? Well, people want what we want. We decided on, it was, before I came to that meeting, I knew what the answer was gonna be. And I think there were quite a few people who would have preferred the Hall School, but you never gave anybody the option to say that. Your final meeting before the referendum, you had a town meeting to move to referendum. And because everybody obviously wanted these new schools, I had the feeling that the board was just gobsmacked when it failed. But how about a public hearing? Well, we don't need a public hearing. If you have anything to say, you can say it at the town meeting when we move to referendum. We go to the town meeting to move to referendum. Oh, you got 2 minutes to speak and you can only speak to the question. How would you ever know that anybody was gonna vote no? Because nobody ever stood up at the public hearing that you didn't have, or at the town meeting that you wouldn't allow anybody to speak and said they were against it. So if you have a survey, be careful and make sure it's a survey to find out what people want and not what you want to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Online, Pete Tanaka.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, a couple of things. One, Mike, you mentioned postcards and mailing them to every household. I don't think that would be the appropriate thing to do, is every household has a different number of voters. And so you'd have to send a postcard to each voter, not to each household. As far as communications, I came to the same conclusion John did. Up until about 5 years ago, if you wanted to speak to a topic during a meeting, you could raise your hand and speak to that topic. I would have liked to have talked about postcards an hour and a half ago. And that would be all I had to say to it. So it would have made that it wouldn't have held the meeting up any. And speaking of holding up meetings, a 2.5 hour meeting is a detriment to communications. I can make it through about 2 hours and then I'm done with the meeting. Let's see. And then the last thing I wanted to talk to is it was mentioned that the public might want to punish the committee for the decision. I don't believe that's true. I think that the public wants the committee dissolved so that we can move on to some of these reimbursable projects, and that the committee has lost the trust of the town when they came back for that $100,000 a second time on exactly the same referendum question 6 weeks later. And I believe, from what I've been hearing from town, it's not that they want to punish the committee, it's that the committee has lost their trust and that they don't want to see that referendum question coming up again in 6 weeks, exactly like it was written before, in an effort to get it passed again and again and again. That once the town has spoken, they want their voice to be heard and not ignored and brought back until the people in charge at the town get the answer that they want. That's what I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. In the room, Elaine?
Yeah, first I have a
State
question.
your name for the record, please.
Elaine Newcomb, 28 Fermier Road. First of all, I just want to fact check on something. That was this new school designed for all pre-kindergartners?
Where this is present to speak, it's not Q&A.
Yeah. See, this is the
the problem.
This became, well, it also became a fact problem before the referendum. And there was no answer. Okay, I will go back to, this is the third time I've approached some of you and in larger bodies too. I wrote a letter, I read it, I reiterated it at a later point. And I think it goes directly to the question of the town, the trust, the vote, the whole thing. This is a tremendously big question that was put before the town. And the cost was a huge point to most, probably to almost all taxpayers. Some people were just very, very enthused and weren't really counting their pennies. But the thing that would have made sense first, as I said in that first letter, in the meeting at Hall School, is that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance owed the townspeople a meeting to evaluate all of the pending needs in this town to see what we were going to be able to handle, and therefore what might be affordable and palatable to the town's voters relative to the referendum. Having attended some of the other town meetings, I became aware of a whole lot of the engineering work that needs to be done on Schofield Road is a huge big ticket item. There's big needs in the fire department. There's big needs in a lot of places. We still never really advanced the emergency system at all, even alert. And I asked that the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen do a big look at the town to figure out what might be affordable. And at that point, the committee, everybody might have gotten a clue as to what the town could handle and have really good, solid information. There was a lot of debate and a lot of question on how much the taxes were actually going to go up. No, just a minute. Yeah, and I won't even go there. The other big factor relative to the referendum was the fact that we were not going to know what the state was willing to reimburse us until after we passed a project. Most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. That's saying you're going to buy the car or you're going to buy the house, and then later you'll find out what kind of a rebate you might get. And that was a critical point for a lot of people. People have to vote their pocketbook. It's not a choice. And we happen to be in a miserable economic situation right now. And the inflation and the cost of everything and the pressure to change the way you do everything. Go get an electric car, go do this, go do that. We're not gonna, oil went through the roof. There's too much unpredictability for people to take a flying leap on something that they're really not sure of. So whatever comes up, whether it's this committee, whether it's another committee, that's where you start, is what can people handle? And what the other question I would ask is, of the proposal that was put forth, was that the cheapest possible school we could have built? Or not? Because sometimes people think, well, I'll start high, and then if we have to come down, which makes it not an honest process. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, thanks. So I think it seems to me you're looking for a survey.
Matt Clark, correct?
Yeah, Matt Clark, 42 Burt Latham Road.
Thank you.
It seems to me you're looking for a survey to give you direction. I mean, I think, substituting a survey or survey results, I can't help it. It's like you're substituting that for leadership. I think if you're connected to the community, you would know and have an idea about these things a little better than what the result was, which was 70-30 against. The survey you're going to do won't give you the kind of direction you desire. About 1/3 of the people, I think, are going to be resoundingly in favor of of a brand new school on brand new land. And about 2/3 are going to be all over the place. They're going to have lots and lots and lots of different reasons. And that's the difficult part. If this was easy, anybody could do it. But that's the difficult part. And that takes leadership, listening, multiple communications, and honesty. And so anyway, also, as Mike indicated, Phil Stevens is an advocate for a new school. So I don't think Phil should be analyzing survey results moving forward. At your first meeting in the winter of last year or the year before, I can't remember, I suggested that we have a referendum, that the referendum be posed as, here's the options of what we can do. Which one do you want? And that didn't happen, and we got an up or down vote on a single option, and it wasn't good. I also expressed opposition to combining 5-year-olds with 8th graders. I think it's a bad idea. I don't know. I'm almost done. Just a couple more lines here. I mean, I took notes. I don't know why I keep hearing about communication. You had lots of communication continuously. You know, I'll be quite frank. I mean, complaining that you're always hearing from the same people is insulting. Why am I here speaking if I'm just one of the same 50 people? I guess my participation isn't wanted. That's the message, or that it doesn't matter because there's a whole bunch of other people that aren't here talking at the same time. And again, I'll reiterate again, please start with the budget. Start with what people are willing to pay and increase taxes, and then work backward from there. It's a deductive process, not an inductive process. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick?
Nick Tello, 49 Myrtle. Very frustrated that this committee didn't recommend to Board of Selectmen that they should be dissolving. Survey for direction is just not needed. We know we need to do the repairs. It's very clear. You know, the people have already spoken about this. Peter's comments that the SBC was stacked is a legitimate concern from many people in town. I've heard this over and over from people in town. And I hear that there's many people that would be interested in joining a town building committee, which could replace some members that are currently there. From what I've heard in town, it's not trying to punish the members as a reason. The big reason is there's a lack of trust with the SBC. Not all, but many on this committee just can't be trusted. James was a very vocal pro-new school person, and he was thrown onto the Board of Finance in the same night, immediately thrown into the SBC because he was known to be a pro-new school advocate. Just like many members in the beginning were put on this new school committee to push for a new school. The asking for the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education for a recommendation on how the SBC should go it's already a foregone conclusion, having the same members with an altered charge. I hope I'm wrong, but we know what the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education is going to recommend. In regards to Mike's comments earlier about a superintendent coming to this town about proposing for a new school, I hope a superintendent would not push for a new school without taking consideration of the whole picture of the town. I disagree that a superintendent should push for a new school knowing it could hurt the kids' home environment. It's just improper. Parents are struggling to put food on the table. You know, a superintendent making $150,000, $160,000 a year is not living that same struggle. They don't understand that struggle. But they shouldn't be pushing for a new school when it hurts the community. The superintendent needs to be able to have the ability to look at the whole picture and not be short-sighted. When we voted at town hall, it was said that the money would be returned back to the people. That was the second time around for that CIP money. The SBC didn't want to change its charge when it asked many times, and now all of a sudden it thinks it deserves the ability to do so. Phil's comments on the survey shows that the surveys are skewed based on what was received in the past. Those that showed up at hall was a true representation basically of what we saw on the vote. I hear from people rather vote than fill out a survey. People are busy with their own lives. They don't have time to fill out these things. James saying we didn't really hear the concern of mixing the student body wasn't really heard. I heard that many times, and I even talked about that. Again, we know why it failed. The SBC tonight mentioned many of the main reasons why it failed. You literally answered the questions proposed to a survey. Save the town $800 to $2,000 from being spent on a waste of a survey. I want to state, while the Board of Selectmen are working out an ethics policy and such, any future SBC/building committee should establish some baseline ethics policy. A committee member shouldn't have a company they work for profit off of our situation, and we shouldn't have any board members profiting or having a family or close friends profiting off this situation. Not dissolving is going to create more lost trust to this current committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Arthur?
Good evening, Arthur Christensen, 14 Birch Meadow Lane. I'm just going to keep this brief, and I only wanted to say that there's been a lot of diverse opinions over the past couple meetings, and I just wanted to thank the chairman, thank Mike McHugh for allowing everybody to speak their time, not cutting anybody off and not limiting anybody to their time limit. I think that's very important to the feedback, and I think that everybody, especially myself, I really appreciate that that was done in these two meetings, and I hope that it continues as things are discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
Alan Ayers, 38 Timber Lane. I just wanted to touch on a few things. I think we're spending way too much time worrying about like how the present to speak rules work. And, you know, I'm one of the people that's here to speak. But the real issue is how to reach 1,791 people, not the 50 people that keep coming on and like talking all the time. I think the survey is really important. I think one of the things in the survey that you have to ask is you have to ask the people, not, you know, why they voted, but ask them what they thought they were voting for. Like what amount they thought they were actually voting for. I think it would be interesting to see if people really thought that they were voting, you know, for a $28 million school or a $63 million school. Also, like if you were going to do, I don't know how legally it would work, but is there a way to do another referendum? If you were to ask, you know, to approval for $60 million to put forward for the grants, the actual building of the school would be contingent on getting the grants and the waiver. You know, so you could get, you know, the woman earlier just talked about, you know, how you have to approve the school without knowing. You know, could you put wording in there so that the people would know that you would not build the school unless you were going to receive the proper reimbursement? Thank you.
Thank you. Any more present to speak? All right, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. I'll second that. All those in favor say aye and wave goodbye. Thank you all for your time.
9:01 p.m.
At 9:01 p.m. we are adjourned.